and welcome to Education Chat, a podcast made by students for students. Today, my co-host Alicia Polino and I are joined by our guest, Mimi Jollie. Hi, Mimi. Welcome to
Hi there.
Education Chat. So could you start by describing your childhood for us and where you grew up?
Sure. I grew up in this city called Pomona. It's in California. It's in SoCal. And it's described as an urban environment, right? So when people typically refer to urban environments, they talk about places that typically don't have a lot of professions in where people can earn, high amounts of money. So a lot of the work is minimum wage jobs, people, working in service roles, people who don't have the best education because of things like property tax and, just property ownership. So think of places with a lot of warehouses or a lot of factories, right? This is what this city, comprises of: people, working class individuals who work a lot of time, Monday to Saturday, maybe 7 days out of the week, doing what they need to do to survive.
So with that, I do want to kind of jump into what kind of inspired you to pursue your education as a first generation Latinx student, and your upbringing, what essentially just made you want to follow through with your higher ed.
Yeah, so I felt like I didn't have a choice. So I was the firstborn daughter of a Mexican-American Latinx family, first generation. My parents came from Mexico when they were 18, 19. And, they started off, relying on other people to, get ahead in life. And as the firstborn, everything was kind of set on, you are going to be the person who gets us out of this cycle of poverty. You're going to be the one that helps your siblings, helps your family, right? And so that type of mentality was always ingrained, and so I was really, great at like academics, and I started like reading at a young age, and it was just like this emphasis on education is the way you're going to make it out of poverty.
With that being said, I mean, it's obviously a lot of pressure for one person to have on their shoulders. Can you describe what other types of pressures come with being the first person in your family to go to college?
Yeah, so you basically are expected to teach your siblings and teach everyone who comes to you on how to navigate those systems. So my family didn't go to college. My father, only received a 6th grade education. My mother dropped out, in 9th grade. And so they didn't have, experience with higher education. They didn't have high school diplomas. So, my siblings, when they were pursuing, their general education, I was the one that they would go to seek out guidance and to assist with homework assignments or, interpreting certain documents that my parents didn't know how to even, understand. They didn't know the language well enough.
And that's actually a really good point that you brought that up, because everyone's using Mimi's being pulled in all these directions. So I'm actually really curious if you had a support system during this time, and if so, who was it, and how did they help to guide you during this journey since you were experiencing it for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I attribute a lot of my professors and teachers and just educators who saw something in me. And, I mean, I don't even know to this day exactly what they saw, but they obviously, spent a lot of time trying to provide education and, guidance and mentorship. And I remember things like, other students would read some kind of material that was, age appropriate or, whatever grade we were in. And I was receiving books about, this book about war or Jane Goodall when you're like in 1st grade.
So can you go into detail about what growing up in a negative environment means to you and how impactful it is to a child's self-esteem and outlook on the future?
Yeah. So growing up in a negative environment, if you want to call it that, it means being distracted by a lot of sound pollution, like ambulances and, police sirens and people fighting outside, and just, seeing people trying to survive, but it's not pretty. Like this is people who, they're doing whatever they can to survive. Like I grew up in this area that was right at the corner of a prostitution, area. Like there's people who would dress a certain way and advertise their services. And that was a very well-known fact in the neighborhood.
I actually like that you mentioned sound pollution. I've never heard of that before. And I think that's just like just so many layers to it. And by it, I mean just kind of like the cycle of poverty. And
Mhm.
with that, why do you think it is so hard for families to escape it and just for families to be so comfortable in this lifestyle, even though there are ways to get out, but not choose to get out?
It mostly comes from a sense of being beat down by a system that no one flat out calls out. It's just the way that it is. And if you look a certain way, if you speak a certain way, if you have a certain educational background, then you are appropriate in these other areas. But if you're not, then, people tend to pick up on that and they start putting you in little boxes and judge you based on, where you're from or how you look or how you speak. And to answer your question, why do people stay in these areas? It's because they don't see people that look like them, that represent their backgrounds in these positions of power, if you want to call it that.
And that's why representation is so important.
Yeah.
And I love that you use that word comfortable, Alicia, because I feel like a lot of people, they're living this lifestyle and they don't know any different, and it just becomes so normal to them, and
Mhm.
they don't know what to do sometimes, and sometimes
Yeah.
they know that they can do better, but it's just like they settle. This is my life and I'm fine with it. So you
Definitely.
expressed that during college you relied on financial aid and you worked 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet, which I don't know how you did it, but props to you because you are a warrior, you're a soldier.
Thank you.
But doing that on top of school must have been a lot for you, right?
Yeah,
So
it's called not sleeping.
yeah. So
Energy drinks.
how and where did you find that motivation? Like what kept you going through all of that?
It was a realization of like, either I keep at it and one day I make it out and I can enjoy the fruits of my labor, or I get stuck in this system and it's going to be way harder. It's going to be harder to get out of it later down the line. Especially when, a lot of people say, oh, like I don't want to stop school because once I stop, life happens or other things, other distractions, and then I won't want to go back. So for me, it was just a thing of like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of this, to make it out with a, undergrad, diploma or, degree, and then pursue, graduate school and try to do the best that I can to, do what I want to do.
As someone right now in my undergrad degree, really inspiring because that it's just like you said, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I feel like a lot of people just they'll never understand. So really inspiring, Mimi, honestly. So with that, with you, you have your undergrad degree and you have your graduate degree. So
Yeah.
what inspired you to pursue the field that you're in now? And exactly how many degrees do you have? And you have a lot underneath your belt. So if you could talk about that too.
Yeah. So I guess how many degrees? So I have 2 associate degrees that I just got because I wanted to get 2 degrees. and I went to a community college, so there's that. I have one undergraduate degree from Cal Poly Pomona in psychology, and then I have a master's degree in professional behavioral analysis from the Florida Institute of Technology. And I went through this course because I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. But to be a clinical psychologist, you need to have a PhD or a PsyD in clinical psych or any type of, psychology, field. And then, I mean, I don't know the whole course of like how do you get a PhD or whatever. But point is, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and it looked hard because you have to have certain experiences, like research experiences and like letters of recommendation from certain people in the department that you're in, so the psychology department. And these educators look for a certain type of person with a certain type of GPA, with a certain type of background, right? If you don't fit that, then you're not considered. It's highly competitive. So oftentimes people will try to gain, extra experience after undergraduate, under their undergraduate schooling. So they try to be like a research assistant, or they try to work in like some kind of psychological like work, environment. And so I said, okay, I can't get, I can't go into a PsyD or a PhD program right now. So let me try to get some experience in the field of psychology. And I saw a lot of listings for being a behavioral technician or an RBT, which is registered behavior technician. And so I went ahead, I applied, got a job. Turns out that this field, they work with children that have developmental disabilities or things like ADHD, autism, Down syndrome, right? So there are people who need that extra support to learn to navigate the systems that they're in. And I'm sure education isn't always the same for everyone, especially when you're in a special ed classroom. People tend to think that you're not able or capable to do certain things that someone in the general ed classroom would be able to do. So there's that type of need for individuals who can work with other individuals who need a little bit extra time and support to learn as their neurotypical peers.
So then what plans or endeavors do you have for the future?
So in the future, I would like to have my own, ABA company. So ABA is Applied Behavioral Analysis. I would like to, foster, this, group, this community of individuals who want to be there to, help children who need that extra support, because oftentimes, these supports aren't available to a lot of people through the public education system.
I'm going to go down to San Francisco just to see your clinical office. No, but I really like that though, because I know for a lot of families who have never experienced, ADHD or children with special needs, they don't know what to do. It's really overwhelming. And just to have you or anybody in your field to be that like support, I think that's really, really cool. So with that, we are at the end of our podcast. But before we leave, I do want to ask, what advice do you have for someone who is currently growing up in a similar situation to you and that wants more out of their life than what they currently have?
Yeah, I think it starts off with, setting small goals for yourself that, will lead you to your end goal. And if you don't know where to start, asking people who are in those areas, that you want to be part of, right? So if you want to be a teacher, like contact teachers, ask someone that is a teacher or who's going to school to be a teacher, right? Or a doctor, or a nurse, anything that you want to do, get that, experience or that first-hand experience, and knowledge from those individuals. And also just making sure that you know what you want, in the sense of like, this is what I want, these are my obstacles, these are my barriers, but how can I overcome them, right? What can I do now? What's in my control at this moment?
I think that was beautifully said.
I love that. Thank you so much for talking with us, Mimi, and telling us about your life and everything. It's very inspiring, and I'm sure that the people in our audience will resonate with everything that you said. So thank you again, and we wish you the best of luck in everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.